I used uncertainty as a reason to stay still. 2 years. That is how long I spent not making a decision I had already made, in the sense that I knew what I wanted and I simply would not authorize myself to want it. The reason I gave myself, and I gave it consistently, with a kind of disciplined repetition that I now recognize as a management strategy, was that I didn't know what would happen. The choice was geographic and directional. I had been living in a city that had ceased to feel like mine, in a work situation that had grown stagnant, and there was a different city, a different trajectory, a different version of what my daily life could contain, all of it real, all of it available, none of it guaranteed. I didn't know if the move would produce what I hoped it would. I didn't know if the new path would work out. I didn't know if I would regret leaving the things I would have to leave. These were genuine unknowns. I was not fabricating the uncertainty. The uncertainty was real. What I was doing with it was the thing worth examining. I was using uncertainty as a threshold requirement. I had, without fully articulating it to myself, set a condition: I would make the decision when I knew how it would turn out. Until I knew, the decision was premature. Staying still was not a choice, it was simply the responsible absence of a choice, the correct posture of a person who had not yet gathered sufficient information. This is the logic that requires close examination, because it sounds reasonable on the surface. Information is useful. Hasty decisions without adequate understanding are a real failure mode. Caution in the face of the unknown is not irrational. But the specific version of it I was operating was not caution. It was the use of irreducible uncertainty as a permanent deferral mechanism. The unknowns I was citing, will it work out, will I regret it, will the new path deliver what I hope, are not unknowns that resolve with additional waiting. They are unknowns that are intrinsic to the decision. They cannot be answered in advance because they are produced by the decision itself. You find out by going. There is no other way to find out. I had assigned myself homework with no possible completion date. A therapist I saw during this period, I'll call her Dr. Marsh, asked me, at one point, to describe what I was waiting for in specific terms. Not the feeling of certainty, the actual information. What would I need to know, and how would I come to know it, before I felt the decision was appropriate to make? I could not answer the question. I sat with it for a long time and could not produce a coherent answer, because there was no coherent answer. There was no piece of information that was available and that, once I had it, would resolve the uncertainty. The uncertainty was the permanent condition of this decision, as it is the permanent condition of all decisions that involve the future. What I was actually doing, I came to understand, was managing the anxiety of the undecided state rather than resolving it. Staying still was uncomfortable, but it was a familiar discomfort. Moving was also uncomfortable, but it was an unfamiliar one, and the unfamiliar discomfort had no track record for me to reference. I had survived staying still before. I had less evidence about what moving would cost. The asymmetry was not rational. It was procedural. My nervous system had an established protocol for the discomfort of not deciding and no established protocol for the discomfort of deciding wrongly. So it kept routing me back to the known discomfort, labeling it as responsible waiting, and presenting the unfamiliar discomfort as avoidable risk. This is the mechanism: uncertainty tolerance. The capacity to act in the presence of what cannot be known in advance. Some people develop this capacity through temperament, most develop it through accumulated experience of having survived decisions whose outcomes were unknown. The experience teaches the nervous system that the unfamiliar discomfort is also survivable, and gradually the routing changes. I had not accumulated enough of that experience to trust it. So I stayed. 2 years. Not 2 years of active suffering. There were good periods, there was work that mattered, there were relationships and moments of genuine engagement. But there was also a steady quality of postponement in the background. A sense of the real life waiting at a distance while the managed life occupied the foreground. That sense did not intensify dramatically, it just persisted, quietly, at a constant level, like background noise you stop hearing but that is still affecting you. The thing that finally moved me was not the resolution of the uncertainty. It was the recognition that the uncertainty was never going to resolve. Dr. Marsh had asked me the question about what I was waiting for, and the answer had been empty, and I had spent 6 more months after that session continuing to wait despite knowing the answer was empty. Eventually the knowledge reached a critical mass, not a single moment of clarity, but a slow accumulation of the same understanding arriving repeatedly until it could no longer be absorbed without consequence. I made the decision on a Wednesday, without feeling ready, without knowing what would happen, in the same uncertainty I had been carrying for 2 years. The uncertainty did not change. My relationship to it changed. I stopped treating it as a reason and started treating it as a condition, the weather in which the decision had to be made, not a forecast that needed to improve before I could move. The move happened. The new path had the texture of something real, not uniformly successful, not uniformly comfortable, but real in the specific way of something you have actually entered rather than circled from a distance. The unknowns became knowns, over time, at the pace that unknowns always become knowns, by living through them. Some of it worked out better than I had hoped. Some of it was harder than I had anticipated. None of it was improved by the 2 years I had spent not doing it. The uncertainty was never an obstacle. It was always just the condition. Every meaningful decision is made in that condition. The ones that change something are the ones where you decide anyway. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real, do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable. It builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.